Welcome to Arts First, the show that stands for freedom of expression in the arts and art for art's sake. I'm Niall Crowley, and with me is my co-host Wendy Earle. Today we're taking a dive into the world of contemporary art, namely the New Contemporaries exhibition, currently on show at the South London Gallery. To help us along with this monumental task, I'm joined by two really good friends of the show, the artist Rachel Jordan and curator, writer and campaigner Manik Govinda. Welcome both. New Contemporaries is a long-running institution on the contemporary art scene. It began in 1949 as Young Contemporaries, which was an annual exhibition that was established to present new work by emerging artists in the UK. These days, it organises the National Touring Exhibition, where works are selected by established figures from the art world. And this year, the exhibition kicks off in South London before it heads up to Middlesbrough at the MIMA Gallery, at the end of April. You might have seen in the news last year that the show at the ICA, where there were noisy protests outside by, yes, anti-Israel campaigners against the show's associations with the sponsor Bloomberg. And hopefully we'll come on to that a little bit later. But sticking with the art for now, Rachel, Manik and I went down to South London Gallery last week for a look around the exhibition. Afterwards, we sat in the lovely gardens with a beer and a coffee and a cake, and I asked them to share their initial impressions, and then we agreed to regroup a few days later for a more reflective, more detailed chat. So if you don't know it, that South London Gallery is situated on the Peckham Road, quite near to Camberwell School of Art. It focuses mainly on contemporary art exhibitions by established and younger artists. It was founded in the 19th century by philanthropist William Rossiter to bring art to the people of South London. And we're very grateful for them for allowing us to photograph and film and eat their lovely cake.
What was your overall impression of New Contemporaries?
It is, I think, as one of the newspaper critics said, it is a very disparate show. But in a way, that's a strength because the work isn't grouped around one particular theme. It is literally the choice of the selectors of which emerging artists they think merit a place on their development programme.
There are, while it's not intentional, there are sort of themes that have been coming through quite a few of the artists' work. And there seems to be a bit of a hankering for the past and nostalgia. There's a sort of a bit of a nostalgic sensibility I felt in some of the work, and maybe that might be to do with the crisis of the present, and maybe looking back at the past for something to anchor themselves. So the piece with the slide projector, which is very conceptual, it works with text, the rhythm of the slide projection, which is again just text pieces on the slides. You start to realise that it is a political piece of some form, but it's kind of quietly political, probably critiquing capitalism. And there's a fair bit of that, I think, that's going on in some of the work. But it feels much more gentler this year than it has done for me in the past.
I don't know whether I'd categorise it as nostalgic, but definitely quieter and more reflective. The last time I saw the show was in 2021. There was a time when the works were sort of demanding attention more overtly, more in a sensationalist, maybe not fully sensationalist way, but yeah, these are generally sort of quieter works, more reflective overall. The trouble for me is that if something is trying to be a critique and then it's quiet about it, then you kind of wonder what, are they just trying to tread the line between making a political statement but also letting it be an artwork.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is not tons of explanatory panels.
That's true. That's
which is refreshing. So you are probably kind of stroking your chin a bit more than usual because there's no immediate entry points.
We had to work for it.
Yeah. there's a lot of variety, which I thought was good. Some of it quite fun, like some of the kinetic pieces, the deconstructed washing machine. Did you see that?
Oh, is that what it was?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Actually, I really liked it.
Yeah.
I did get. I mean, I think for me, I'm definitely looking for work that is that makes me feel something, rather than makes me think or challenges me necessarily. So I quite like that, because it just, even though I didn't realise, I had read that it was a washing machine, but then when I saw it, I didn't think of it being a washing machine. But it just made me think of when you're, maybe in a modern building on your own at night, and you hear these noises that are a bit, you don't really know what they are. They're just like the noises of machines, or maybe even just the building responding to the wind or whatever. And maybe it's a slight feeling of alienation, because you're there, but then the building is sort of in a way, it's got a life of its own. That's what I took from it.
So Manik and Rachel, I thought we could begin with the art, pun intended. Manik, do you want to kick off and tell us what caught your eye at the exhibition first of all?
Yeah, sure. So I chose 3 artworks to discuss, or to consider, out of 26 artists. It's quite hard to whittle it down. And it's not maybe work, well, certainly, some of the 3 that I've chosen are not works that I love. I think there's one that I did appreciate most more than the other 2. But I think I chose these because they're a good snapshot of what contemporary art is currently in Britain. And also it's interesting that there's a very kind of global, cosmopolitan kind of feel to the works, and a very rooted British sense of what maybe culture is, or what British art is. So the first artist I'm going to talk about is a young emerging artist called Alia Gargan. She's a British Libyan artist, lives in Newcastle, one of the 50% or so artists that don't live in London, which is what the Contemporaries has prided itself in this year, that a lot of artists don't live in London. And the work is called This Was a Mosque, and it was made in 2025. And it's an installation that comprises of fabric, long emerald green fabrics hanging from rods, steel rods from the ceiling. And it's the emerald green. It's obviously a very strong colour associated with Islam and with Muslims. Most of the flags you see from Muslim countries are the colour, that kind of dark emerald green. So she's obviously making a very direct reference to the idea of a mosque, or what was a mosque. And she kind of creates a soft architecture, because there is a space, but it's a makeshift temporary space. It's a real sense of fragility about it. And at the foot of the fabrics and the ground, there's a pair of rusty octagram stars, which again is another feature that you see in Islamic abstract geometric design and art and mosques and places of worship. But also, as I mentioned, the dark green is a very potent colour that represents Islam. So it feels that the work is hinting about the destruction of mosques during conflicts and wars. And because it was made in 2025, we are immediately thinking about the Israel-Gaza war. And inevitably, many mosques are destroyed in warfare, as well as in other conflict zones. Places of worship are destroyed. So it's an intriguing work in that sense, because it hints at temporality, fragility, a makeshift mosque that still tries to become a communal place of worship. It's a work that I don't particularly love, but I can see what she's trying to convey. Aesthetically, it's not my cup of tea. It reminds me of Miriam Alia's book, which looks at the kind of tropes of contemporary art. And one of them is about a torn up fabric hanging from the ceiling. So it's a very common trope in contemporary art. So But this one's obviously got a particular association with the artist's identity as a British Libyan artist, about memory, loss, displacement, destruction. And it kind of converses quite well with another piece that I to talk about, which is by a Ukrainian artist, British based now. Her piece is called Slide, and that was made last year. And it's a stainless steel playground slide, so children's playground slide, quite small. And it sits in a sort of rectangular pool of sort of reflective black ink and dye. It's very functional, very utilitarian. There's nothing fancy about this slide, and it's well constructed as a sort of metal sculpture. And but it obviously is, again, looking at childhood, memory. The artist being born in Ukraine, I think, in 1997. Her childhood was spent there, and it kind of echoes a sense of that history of Soviet Russia, or say USSR. And there's something very melancholic about it because it sits there quite alone. But it's also one thing we have to remember about these kind of sculptural installations is that they are normally part of a larger body of work. So what we're getting with these two installations is just an element of something that is part of a larger concept. And that's the most you can do if you're selecting 26 works of art, 26 artists. So they kind of hint at something that's intriguing. Do I like them both? Possibly they're okay. And I think this is the trouble with the show generally. It's a kind of an okay exhibition. It's very much contemporary art for a contemporary art audience.
The first piece you mentioned was certainly the most striking, wasn't it? Maybe it's just because it was the most tall, and I didn't know what to make of either of those pieces really, but actually it's quite interesting listening to you reflecting on them. You made me think quite a bit, so that was quite interesting. The second one, the slide, I think that was picked up on in the press. It's made out of galvanized steel, wasn't it? Just there's something very slightly dreary about it, like something out of the garden shed a little bit, and then it sits in this bed of oil. It's just very still and lonely almost. So anyway, that's my thoughts. Rachel, what did you want to say?
Yeah, so on the slide, it didn't make me think of a garden actually, Niall, but it's more that it's desolate. It's got a coldness, and I think it made me think of Eastern Europe, something desolate basically, and then also because I know on the day we were discussing why is it small? Wouldn't it work better if it was bigger? But maybe there's something about it being small that conveys something. It's a slide is associated with children, so maybe it's about childhood being stunted because it's not a big slide, and if you slid down it you'd go into the black ink or whatever it is around it. So I can see why it was in the press, because it's an intriguing piece, as is the other one that Manik spoke about. And I think for me, when you go to art shows, then again, like Manik, I wouldn't necessarily say they were my top picks, but in the function of a whole space in a room, there's something about having three-dimensional piece of work that actually makes a show come more alive than if you've just got 2D work on all the walls. So I don't know whether artists who make sculpture realise that I think they're kind of doing painters and photographers, anyone who's making 2D work, I think they're doing them a favour because they lift the room. But this was a mosque. Yeah, it's interesting what you say, Manik, about it being a contemporary, doing something sculptural that's using fabric hanging. There was work in the Tate several times in the past few years by different artists, huge pieces of textiles or fabric. But you sort of wonder where will that end up in the future? For example, in the South London Gallery, the ceiling is high there, but if the work was put in a smaller gallery or a space that had a lower ceiling, would that affect how the work was displayed? These are things that are not clear to me.
I think that's what's interesting. It's another trope of that kind of installation art. It can work in many ways. So if it was a smaller gallery, you'd probably hang it differently. Or the curator would suggest how to hang it. Looking at the website, when it's been shown elsewhere, it's in a completely different shape.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So it works according to scale, context. There's probably no strict specification of how it's hung.
Right. Okay. Interesting. So one of the pieces that I selected is a painting, a big oil painting by an artist called Ali Fallon, who also happened to, who's a young artist, happened to win the John Moores Painting Prize last year, which is a really prestigious show. And the painting is called In My Beginning Is My End, which I haven't really understood the title in relation to the work, because it looks like sort of a room with tiles. The back wall is dark green tiles, and then the floor is sort of black and white pattern tiles. And I think I like it because it's is a mix of figuration and abstraction, and it's well painted. I think the paint handling is actually good. I find a lot of paint handling by younger artists often I find quite jarring. When I actually see work online and think, oh, that looks good, and then I've gone to see the work in person and thought, oh, there was like no underpainting, like literally nothing. Whereas this actually seems he can use the paint well, which is probably why I won the prize last year. There's a sort of familiarity because you've got this sense of like a space. Even though there's no people in it, it doesn't feel desolate. There's something familiar about these places, like the floor tiles seem what you might see in certain era buildings. So I think there's a sort of intrigue. It's just enjoyable to look at, I think. Yeah. Don't know if there's deeper meaning, but I think it's the kind of painting, because of the way it's painted, you can just enjoy it for the texture of the tiles in the work, and maybe just imagining the space.
There wasn't a great deal of painting in the exhibition, was there? Manik, did you pick up on that?
I have to say, of all the range of media and the show, I was the least taken by most of the paintings, to be honest. The piece you're talking about, Rachel, it kind of feels that it's been done a few times about space or the interior architecture of a space. The echoes of whatever it's trying to convey, of whatever that presence might be, or non-presence, makes you focus, yes, on the detail of the tiling and the wall. And perhaps there's that kind of sense that it's an empty space. Technically, I thought it was well done, it was accomplished, but it didn't say much to me, to be honest.
No, it's definitely understated. And I remember saying to you last week when we were there that it's a very different show to say something that might have been around 20 or so years ago. It feels like, I don't know whether that's all the artists that applies, therefore it's a true reflection, or it's a more of a reflection of the selectors. But yeah, the work is not screaming out loud. It is more subtle. In a way harder to get used to, because we've been used to so many shows that have been really like sensationalist. But in his defense, he's a young artist still. And so I think that's one of the reasons why I picked it. I didn't pick him on purpose, but then I was pleased to find he was a young artist who, hopefully is going to continue to develop.
Do you want to tell us about your second piece? It's a photograph, isn't it?
Yeah, it's called Compression by Timon Benson, also based in Manchester, and Ali Fallon. So this is a really large colour photo of lots of young people together. It is obviously staged. but it seems quite natural nevertheless. And they're all sort of, some are standing, some are lying, some are almost kind of lounging back on the big squashy cushion or something. And some are interacting with each other. One person's looking down at a phone, someone else is looking sad, someone else looking really animated. So you've got this group of young people who convey something timeless to me about just how people interact. And yet, obviously, it is a contemporary photo. It's not trying to look vintage in any way. I just thought it was really well put together. And the artist himself says he's interested in relationships and connection. And I thought that came through and I felt connected to it. What about you, Monique? I think
Yeah, I
you
thought.
liked it as well, didn't you?
Yeah, I thought it was a very good photograph. It feels very much of that, what is the young generation, and everyone just piling in, a couple snogging, someone rolling a spliff.
Oh, I missed that.
So it was a chap, yes, in the foreground, at the front, sitting down cross-legged, rolling one. So it felt very much like this is what student life must be like, and maybe it's also a statement on, because it's such a crammed room, and it does for me feel like this is what students live in. They live in these kind of dingy, mouldy, and they all squeeze in and drink vodka and smell dope. And
Yeah, it definitely
have
there was a party vibe to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that the fact that it was so obviously posed and it had got an element of fun about it as well. I thought that was quite good because you think of today, photography today, and Gen Z. Are we on? I can't remember. And we were talking a little bit about this with Tiffany Jenkins in the previous episode about photography revealing and people revealing themselves, their intimate lives. This didn't feel like it fitted in with that in a way. It was just a, hey, look, we're having a lot of fun doing this. So I thought it was quite an interesting contrast. I think it caught all of our eyes when we went in.
Yeah. I thought it was a very well composed photograph, actually.
Yeah. So, Manik, your third piece was a video?
There's a lot of video pieces
Wow.
in the show, and obviously that demands a lot of time and attention. Video art is something that is a bit of a sort of Marmite thing. A lot of people hate it, some people love it. I've worked in that field as a producer, and curator, so I do have a lot of interest in video art. So the one that I really did like, I watched them in full, about 3 or 4 of the pieces on the day. But in the main space, Gregor Trikovic, he did a 12-minute video, which is on a flat screen monitor. Listen with headphones, although it is captioned, but you do need to hear it actually to really appreciate it. And it's called Sincerely Victor Pike. So it's a video piece which it's very dreamy, very melancholic, very poetic, and it's based on conversational narratives. So he's recorded loads and loads of conversations with his friends, lovers, acquaintances, family, and that's become a sort of archive. Again, it's about memory, so it's become an archive of his memories. And what he does with it is these narratives kind of weaves into a very dreamy story where there's no time, place, location specified. It reminds me of sort of David Lynch, David Cronenberg, very Burroughs. There's a kind of queerness to it. But also what was really, I thought, works well in the piece is that all the images have been generated through AI, artificial intelligence, that's accompanying the audio narratives. It's kind of very fluid, unfixed, kind of liquid-like bodies that are hybridized, and American highways and cars that kind of feel unreal, but also there's a sort of retro-futuristic kind of feel to it. And the vibe is very melancholic, but it draws you in and gets quite hypnotizing. And I think it's probably one of the most interesting pieces of AI-generated works that I've seen, because while the audio narratives are very human, they're kind of like a letter. So hence the title, Sincerely Victor Pike, an imaginary dressing. The images feel very unreal. They almost feel quite post-human, but they do hint at a sort of sense of humanness, and but the bodies are kind of conjoined, limbs are all over the place, which you get in AI imagery quite a lot, but they're very dreamy, very very surreal, actually, in that sense. It says that it's been recording these conversations for about a decade, since 2016. It's got hundreds of them, and it's almost trying to find a way to contain as much of that as possible through almost a sort of surrealist lens. But the lens is the machine, it's artificial intelligence. It has a kind of warm, soft fuzziness to it. It's human, but it's not quite human.
Do you think it kind of answers that accusation about AI, that the AI is just there to reproduce what already exists? It's like a dead end for artists.
I disagree, actually. I think it's not a dead end. It's how you use it. So some people might just use it as a tool, and that's as far as it goes. I don't use AI much. I try to avoid it as much as possible. So hence, I'm always fascinated when artists are creating work with AI. There's something utopian about it, and perhaps it's this kind of queer utopianism that he's exploring. Again, the fluidity, the kind of loss of objective reality. But there's something that is quite dreamy, that is quite imaginative, maybe verging on a bit of sci-fi. Do androids dream of electric sheep or not? That sort of Philip K. Dick kind of proposition. And if AI is used to just open up the imagination a lot more, I think it becomes like...
Yeah, I agree. I think humans and artists are always going to find a way to...
Yeah. Sorry. So that was I think the most interesting of the video pieces, of which there were many.
Okay, Rachel, did you have any thoughts on that, or do you want to move on to your final piece?
Well, I didn't watch much of it in the gallery, but I've watched it since because it's available online, which in a way I think is the good thing about video pieces, is that, and in fact, I don't know whether a gallery is the right place really to show video. But anyway, I agree with what Manik said. It's sort of, it's quite dreamy, but also you've got fragments of conversation, and the AI is serving the artist's purpose. It's not that the artist has said, okay, AI, make this film for me. I feel like he's created separate sections of AI imagery and then incorporated it into his work. That's how it looks to me. We may find out it's not that way, but that's how it looks. I kind of like the mini narratives as it goes through the different sections.
Okay. Your third piece
is also a video.
What's a film there?
Yeah, I thought I'd branch out into video.
Okay. Hit us with it.
So this artist is a female artist called Viviana Almas, who is originally or parentally Lithuanian, but I think she grew up in the US and now based in London. And her film, actually, she had two films. I wasn't so keen on the other one, but this one called Solus was made with Super 8 film rather than digital. So the film itself had that sort of grainy, vintage quality. And it was an interesting experience watching it because it was an artist walking through a fairly bleak landscape. And this artist looks like he is from another era, and he's wearing a suit and a hat and has got a canvas very visibly strapped to his body, to his back. But there's sort of big bits of fabric sort of wound around to attach the canvas to him. So it looks quite dramatic, quite striking. And he also has a cross, like a religious cross above his head, and he's walking across the landscape. So you're just sort of wondering, what's this person doing? Where are they going? And it's really, in the end, he sort of more merges with the landscape. And the artist herself said that she was thinking about how an artist's life and practice are inseparable. So you're taken on the journey where it's suggesting that the artist going out into the landscape, he sort of becomes one with it. But it really made me think about Van Gogh. She doesn't mention that as an influence, but it really conjured up for me just the idea of that we have a Van Gogh striding out into the fields in Provence to paint. And obviously he did have a religious background himself. In fact, he trained to be a priest at some point. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Did you watch it, Manik?
I did. It's interesting because I thought maybe it was a kind of false sense of being an old, almost like found piece of the 1920s film.
Yeah, it did have a really old feel to it, yeah.
So obviously the After Effects actually might have done is to make it look like a sort of strange artifact that found perhaps in some lost library of a film, somewhere. But I liked it. I did like it. I thought it was intriguing. There's a sort of absurdist theatricality about it. Yeah, it was quite light touch, but it was fun. I thought in sort of a pleasant way.
Great, that's really good. Wendy, are you intrigued?
Yeah,
Comments?
I am intrigued. I mean, you haven't sold me on tripping across London to actually go and see the exhibition myself. But when Niall and I talked about the idea of you doing it, I was very keen on it because I think one of the things I find for myself and a number of my friends is we're very ready to dismiss contemporary art. And that seems to me kind of unfair to artists who are working today. I think one has to try and keep an open mind. And I think the difficulty is really knowing how to look at it and appreciate it. And I think the two of you really made an effort to bring out what is worth looking at in the works that you chose. So I really appreciate that. I was saying before the recording started about having just been to see the Saatchi Gallery exhibition, The Long Now, the contemporary artists that are represented by Saatchi. A lot of those artists are actually quite well established by now. But it was a similar thing about really not knowing how to look at that art and think about it and engage with it. So I'm quite keen to pursue this on Arts First. I'm quite keen to pursue this theme of how we might engage more with contemporary art. How do we make judgments about it? How do we just not simply dismiss it because we don't understand it or because it has different... it may or may not be rooted in traditions that we appreciate, like aesthetics and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it feels like a marked departure from the previous new contemporaries. The newish director, she's expanded the definition of emerging artists to without limit, basically. So she wrote a statement, and I'll just quickly quote it because I think it's quite important to hear it, where she said that the 2025 new contemporaries, so because they make the open call the year before the exhibition, about 12 months before. So it's for the first time ever that they're opening the programme to any artist who self-identifies as early career or emerging. So all you have to do is as an artist, as an emerging.
But I think it's interesting because Tracy Emin's got a big retrospective on at the Tate. And I remember when she hit the headlines and a lot of people just thought, this is rubbish. And now those same people are giving rave reviews to her retrospective and her as an artist who's evolved and developed and really come to grips with different aspects of her art making in relation to her own self and in a way changed the landscape possibly for contemporary art. It is probably a good time to start looking at what makes an artist. Can you self-define who decides who is an artist or what is an artist? And how do we decide what is a good and worthwhile piece of art? I imagine a lot of stuff in the South Gallery now might just vanish into the ether in due course, but maybe some of the artists will emerge as contenders for serious attention.
Yeah, and they had 2,800 submissions. So how do you say?
Wow, yes, indeed.
2,800. Yeah.
Well, I was pleased that my three artists were all very young. So I felt like I'm keeping to the true spirit of New Contemporaries. I mean, I think, just going back to what Wendy said about how do you engage with contemporary art. As you know, Wendy, I was involved with the Stuckists many years ago, around the early 2000s. And that was a movement that was very critical of contemporary art, or at least sort of conceptual art. And yeah, even now, you know, the first minute I walked into South London Gallery, I felt like, oh, there's nothing here to really grasp onto. But you do have to give things time. You can't just expect a piece of work to necessarily engage you immediately. And I think there is a strength to this show. Not trying to really sell it to you, Wendy, but I think it's because each artist is only represented by one piece of work. So that is quite a hard thing to hang as a show, but it's also because you've got to make sure that each piece doesn't detract from the ones next to it, but also that artist through the work has got to try and make an impact through that one piece. So it is asking quite a lot of the viewer and the work itself. But I thought overall they'd done as good a job as they could to make it function, in terms of they did have mini groupings. That did help a bit. But I have thought about the work since I saw it, which I think is a good sign.
Okay, brilliant. That's really interesting discussion. Thank you all. Just drawing things to a close. And we'd say something about what happened with Bloomberg, but yeah.
I mean, you know, what happens in the previous year with 28 of the artists staging a walkout and but still having their cake and eat it, because they didn't boycott the New Contemporaries. And they didn't withdraw from it, but they had their work there. They went to the opening. Then they did a stage walkout and talked about the signs, the letter that they wrote about Bloomberg's ties to Israel and is facilitating settlement infrastructure in the West Bank. After 25 years of Bloomberg's philanthropic support for emerging artists on this significant platform, it does feel like a bit of a slap, because you look at the New Contemporaries website, there is no mention of Bloomberg whatsoever, even in the archives. And so they've almost erased the presence of Bloomberg from their history, which is very worrying, actually. You know.
Yeah, I looked for comments. There were no statements on the internet from either Bloomberg or New Contemporaries about what had happened. It just disappeared. Okay, to finish up, Rachel, anything that you want to highlight?
Probably not in a positive way.
Okay.
I think what it made me think about was just how many open call shows there are now. And I think New Contemporaries is actually quite unique in that it didn't have a set theme, whereas there are many open calls for artists where they do set themes. And obviously you can see why a curator may want to have that, because you need something to cohere, an idea to cohere an exhibition around. But I just feel like it's a bit of a lazy way of putting on a show. Obviously, I'm sure there's lots of hard work involved, but it's not a case of people going out and finding new artists and bringing them in. It's just saying, we'll just pick the best of whoever has got the time, money, effort to apply. And from an artist's point of view, there are so many open calls out there. And the general advice is try and get into some open call shows, because they can have a prestige attached to them. You may win a prize, different audience, all the rest, you know, the usual kind of sell. But actually for artists, you do have to be selective, but it's a lot of work to submit to these shows. You also have to pay a fee. On top of that, if you did happen to be lucky and sold your work, then there's a big commission taken off. Everyone does need to get paid, that's fine. But I think the art going public, unless they're artists or no artists, then they wouldn't be aware that that's sort of how a lot of these shows are being put on. And I think my bottom line is that in an environment where funding for public galleries is getting less, artists themselves are the ones, through their fees to enter, are actually subsidizing art galleries. And these are the people who earn on on average, very, very low income per year anyway. And I just don't see it as necessarily a good development, because I see more and more shows of these being arranged.
Should we leave it there? I just want to close it by saying thank you. Thank you for listening to Arts First. You can subscribe for free and listen to all of our episodes at our Substack website. You'll find that at artsfirst.uk. There you'll find relevant links, images, programme notes and other resources, and of course our donations page. You don't have to sign up for access, but if you do, you'll be kept informed of new episodes and articles as they come out. You can also listen to episodes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and on our YouTube channel. If you like what we do, enjoy our podcasts, agree with some of our concerns on freedom of expression in the arts, for example, then we'd really appreciate any support, ideas and feedback. Tell your friends, share our episodes, sing our praises on social media. But for now, many thanks and we'll see you next time.